Bang, Knees Knives. I'm Jared. My lovely wife Kara is at work, and today we are doing blade shape versus blade shape. Now, today I'm going to focus on only two blade shapes. Well, technically three, but I'm going to focus on the drop point and the sheepsfoot blade shape, or slash Wharncliff. I do think of them as three different blade shapes, but there are going to be different variants in each of them. I don't want to focus on too many different blade shapes because then, this video will be entirely too long. Maybe another video. I do want to say that I did see Metal Complex's video earlier from when I recorded this, talking about does blade shape matter. And to an extent, I agree with everything he said on there. I was going to make this video before I even seen that. But I do agree that for basic EDC, for the most part, it's not going to matter, and more the grind and thickness and thinness is going to matter more. I do believe that I fall into the 20%, where I do use my knives maybe a lot more than other people, or maybe my EDC tasks are just a little bit more, I don't know, maybe I just run into more EDC tasks. I do use my knives for work and stuff like that, so especially doing construction, and even at my other job, I use my knives a lot all day. And I think that that's where this is all going to come into play. So let's talk about what the differences are in the blade shape. So a sheep's foot blade shape looks something like this. There are many different variants. I put a few different variants out here. So it's going to have a drop down, and then right before the tip it's going to have a sudden drop, but it will have a belly. So it usually has a flat, a belly, but the spine drops down till it rapidly drops down to the tip. This is called a Wharncliff because a lot of times these names are thrown around for the different blade shapes, but this to me would not be a Wharncliff. This would be a sheep's foot because it does the taper down and then the dramatic drop. Same thing with this. Same thing with this. You see how this is a little different because it has one continuous taper up to the tip, but it's still a sheep's foot. Here's another sheep's foot. Now a Wharncliff, and same thing with this one. A Wharncliff will be one continuous drop. It doesn't have a spot where it just rapidly drops. It goes from the spine all the way down to the tip on a slow taper, but the bottom edge will be completely straight. It will not have any belly like you see in some of these, how they round up a little bit. That's the belly. So right here, that would be belly. A Wharncliff is straight across with a slow taper from the spine down to the tip. That's the difference between a sheep's foot and a Wharncliff. Now let's talk about the different variants of a drop point. Now the differences in a drop point is going to be the belly. Some have more belly than others, but all of them have a straight area, flat area right here, and then from here up to the tip it has a belly. Now how far the tip drops down to the point, depends on what kind of drop point it is, but that's the blade shape. Now you'll see like this one has a little bit more drop, a little less belly, still a drop point. And then this one's kind of in the middle, where it has plenty of belly, but it does have plenty of drop. My favorite is something like this, where it has a little bit more drop, where the tip of the blade is lower on the belly and there's not a whole lot of belly. I like a little bit of belly, not a whole lot. Then there goes as far as a straight back design, which this almost is, but it's not. A straight back design, the spine will be straight across and the belly will go up to the tip, but there will be no drop. But that's not a drop point, that's a straight back. This has a slow, just a little bit of drop with a lot of belly. Also, I just want to say that if you are curious about other blade shapes and what they were made for and what we use them for today, I did an entire video on this subject, on all the different blade shapes, what they were originally made and used for a long time ago, and then what we use them for today. If you want to check that out, it is a little bit older video. I might have missed a couple blade shapes in there, but I got the majority of the blade shapes we use today. As I already said, the grind geometry and thickness is going to play a big part in any one of these blade shapes. You know, and also let me just say this really quick, that I think that everybody's EDC or everybody's tasks for their EDC is different. So this can vary across the board massively for every person. Things that one person might do during the day is the complete opposite of what somebody else might do. So, but for basic EDC stuff, yeah, I don't think it'll really matter because you probably don't use your knife, that often. But when you run into a lot of things you use your knife for during the day, depending on what type of activities you do during the day, depending on, what type of jobs you perform, Anyways, so I think a large belly drop point is going to have different jobs or going to be better at other things than a large drop. And I'm calling it a large drop because the point drops down farther and has a little bit less of a belly. So I do think that they are going to perform tasks differently. Now you're probably looking at this, so let's get to it. Now, I think that between a large belly drop point, or a straight back, you call it that, and a Wharncliff, if you do tasks during the day where you have to cut things out of other objects, especially if it has to do with foam, rubber, any type of tasks where you might have to cut an object out of another object, a big bellied drop point is not going to be very good. And this is the reason why. Is because in order for me to penetrate, now this, I'm using cardboard right now, excuse me, but this could be thick foam, this could be hard, dense rubber, this could be a lot of different things. Excuse me. Now, in order for me to, say, trace something out, I'm going to have to hold my knife, and especially depending on the length of the knife too, I'm going to have to hold it straight up and down to penetrate right here in this corner, right? I'm going to have to hold it straight up and down. Now, for me to outline it and go backwards, I have to have my wrist basically straight up and down. I'll have to have my wrist basically straight up and down where I won't have any leverage to pull backwards. So, and if this was really thick, dense rubber, that's going to be a problem. I'm not going to be able to do it unless if I do a reverse grip and I pull it backwards like that. And then in that return, I'm going to be all over the place, or I'm not going to be sturdy. It's just going to cause a lot of problems. Where a Wharncliff would easily, because now I'm pointing down and I'm going to be able to have the leverage pulling straight back, and I'll be able to see the material going directly into the blade and be able to outline it very easily. And the material will go into the cutting path and separate, whether it's rubber or, foam or whatever it is, doesn't matter. Also, penetrating downward and getting this tip, depending on how thick it is, especially if it's thick, it's going to be a lot harder to pull that through the material or even penetrate in, because I'm trying to push a belly and everything into the material. So like I said, that depends on how dense the material is. It might not be that hard. But versus, say, a Wharncliff, which is everything's going down to one straight point. It doesn't have a big belly and then a point. It's just one acute point. So it's going to penetrate a lot more easier into the corner or to the shape of where I need to go, and then I can do the outlining of what I need to do. Now, a large drop point, meaning where it drops down more, a lot more heavier, is going to do this task fairly well. Not as good as a Wharny, but pretty darn good. A lot easier than a big bellied drop point. Now, I'm going to have a little bit more resistance, but because it does go down to more of an acute tip and it faces down towards my target, it's going to be a little bit more easier. And I'm still going to be able to pull back and, you know, have the leverage the way I need it to be, which is straight back towards me. Now, if we were just cutting cardboard, right? If we were just going to say, just slice cardboard, this would not matter one bit. It would basically do the same thing. So if you're just doing slicing tasks or cutting tasks, like that are just basically cutting up recycling, cutting string, cutting rope, maybe even clipping tie straps, stuff like that, it's not going to matter. It's going to be so it's very, very minute. Now, a little bit more belly for cutting straps and stuff, you know, you might get a little bit more leverage out of a little bit more belly. Now, where the big belly is going to shine now is going to be on, say, skinning animals. What else? Food prep, stuff like that. Now, like, say if we were doing something with wood, right? Like, say if I had a block of wood here and I had to cut out a section, like say a little square section. Let's say I had I needed 2 straight lines right here and I needed to clip that out. Both of these would work just as good. Depending on how deep it is and everything else, a bellied knife might be a little bit better for that. But now, say if it's really thin and I needed to scribe it, now a bellied knife would work fine for that. But I'm going to damage a lot more of my edge than I need to if I was just going to use my tip. Because the tip, yeah, it's going to get damaged, but I'm going to be damaging a small portion versus a lot more portion of the knife. Also, if this was dense rubber or foam or anything like that, which the reason why I'm bringing up dense rubber and foam is because I actually do this a lot during the day. Not every single day, but I do have to do this exact task I'm talking about during the day sometimes. With foam and rubber and stuff like that, and especially when I'm doing construction, you never know what type of material I might have to scribe, to outline, to cut out, or even maybe like say I made a cut right with a saw. Now there's material still inside of my cut. I might have to clean that out. Now I can use a chisel, but sometimes it's easy just to get the edge of my knife down in there and just clip it right out. You know, little things like that. But a big bellied knife or a straight back large bellied knife, you know, might do better on, like, say, skinning fish. Like I said, food prep, skinning animals, maybe out in the woods if you need to shave down some wood, or maybe notch out something to put 2 pieces together, stuff like that. It might shine a little bit more in those tasks, but for just basic EDC tasks, it's probably not going to matter if you don't do a lot of work with your tip. If you need to use the tip of your knife a lot, like I do, then a big belly knife might be perfect for you. And like I said, and then with slicing, sometimes, depending on how long the knife is, a big belly can slip out. Like, it depends on how you look at it, because in some senses it does slice maybe a little bit better, but then in other senses, the belly can slip out a little bit more easier than, say, something that's a little more straighter. Like, I mean, it depends on the material. But, okay, let's get down to the sheep's foot. So now the sheep's foot is going to be a kind of versatile, like with the Wharncliff. It's not going to be as good as the Wharncliff with, say, this type of cutting where, say, I'm going to outline this and I need to cut this out perfectly. I just drew some weird shapes. Normally it'd be like squares and stuff, but one of the biggest factors is going to definitely be blade geometry, how thin and thick something is. But the sheep's foot kind of goes in between, like where it's going to be able to do these things almost as good as a Wharncliff, not as good, but still a lot easier than, say, something with a large belly. Now, if this was just cardboard, you can even see with the big belly, it's still not as easy. And I'm using the tip here, which if this was really dense foam, I wouldn't even be able to. But now if I have to use the belly to go around, I can't do it. It's going to see what happened right there. I can't trace something out with the belly. Now the tip, I can, but it's still not that easy. And if you could see me right now, my arm is up against my body because I'm trying to stop myself from wiggling around and shaking out of line. So big bellied knives are not going to be good for cutting stuff out of other objects. But a Wharncliff and a sheep's foot are going to be very good for that. Now a regular or a drop point that has a heavy drop will work for something like this, especially if it has great blade geometry. Let's finish cutting this out really quick. Let's use the warning. So now, like something like this, and especially if I had to do this like a whole bunch of times in the day, I definitely don't want to make life harder on myself by using something that I'm not going to have as much leverage or anything like that. I'm not even sure. You know what? And see right where the belly was going, or right where the other knife's the tip, I didn't get nowhere near, like it didn't cut this out precisely. Now I could have spent more time on it probably, I'm sure. That was my fault. I'm trying to do this really quick now. But you see, it's just, you're going to get a lot more benefits too, especially getting up in those corners and stuff like that. And like I said, if it was rubber now, also, the rubber, you got to think about how it's cutting around the material. So like, as the object is going through the material, right? How it's pulling around the blade right here is going to have a lot to do with it. Now you see how much resistance, because think about this was thick rubber, that much of the blade would be in there, if not more. Now something like this, it's a lot less because it's thinner, more of a Q-tip, so you're gonna get less resistance than with the other one because it's just bigger. And also, like I said, you know, thickness is gonna have a lot to do with it. This is very thin, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say. Let's see how this was. Did I cut this out? I don't know if I even cut this out, did I? Oh yeah, I did. Oh, I didn't do the bottom half, huh? But, or maybe I did, I don't know. Which part am I missing here? But I do this pretty often, at least a couple times a week. We have this foam that we have to cut out at work, and there's other times it's rubber and stuff like that. And I can't just go from one side to the other. I can't just I mean, sometimes I do have to do that also, one cut just to the other side, but a lot of times I have to cut out of the middle of it. Now, when it's really dense and thick, and I know that's just one thing. So let's talk about other things. Like I said, rubber's a huge one, because it's dense. So you want the least amount of resistance as possible when going through rubber. Like, I wouldn't want to outline or cut anything out with this. Now, like I said, if I'm just doing just average EDC cuts, not a big deal. Or let's say carpet, right? If you had to cut, like, right down the middle of some carpet, or cut a square out of some carpet, or whatever, cutting carpet with the belly of your knife, even cutting this cardboard with the belly of your knife, isn't going to be as easy as a razor blade or a Wharncliff or a Sheepsfoot. So it's going to be more versatile like that. Now, with, say, cordage, I just grabbed a couple crappy pieces of cordage because I'm just going to make a point here. Now, everybody's had something like where it's wrapped around, say, something tight, like a piece of tie strap or zip ties, right? Getting behind it and popping it, the belly right there, it likes to slip out, right? And if you could just drag your whole edge behind it and pull it, not that big of a deal. But a lot of times it's so tight that a Wharncliff is going to slip right behind it, and you're not going to have to worry about this slipping over the belly. But now if you're dealing with cordage that you're cutting on a flat surface, right? And say, like, if you were just pulling it like this, grabbing it and pulling it, not a big deal. You can cut that with any one of these just fine. But now once it's laying down, the belly is going to cut it easier than, say, a Wharncliff. Because especially, it depends on if you have the belly, but if a real Wharncliff doesn't have a belly. So it's not going to be as easy because you have more leverage pointing down. With this, you're flat and you're basically using your leverage going like this, and with the belly you can just use your weight. So it's going to be a lot easier with a belly in that sense. Now, if you're doing like draw cuts where it's material where you can just pull right through like that, then it's not going to be that big of a deal if you can just use the claw and go like that. But depending on what you're cutting on, you don't really want to use the tip of your knife, you know, if it's concrete or, you know, something like that. If it's wood, not that big of a deal. But I think, though, for a lot of people, depending on your EDC tasks, the difference in the type of blade shape you have is going to matter to an extent, but it's especially going to matter for cutting things out and certain dense materials, depending on what it is. And if you're the type of person that you run into all kinds of weird things during the day, you know, whether it's in your garage or in your basement or on the job site, whatever, then it does matter to you. It for sure matters to you. And, you know, maybe you're part of MC's 20%. I guess that's where I'm at. But I think, though, like with the drop point, the belly's going to be the deciding factor, because one that has the large drop, you have the belly, but you also have a downward facing tip, which is going to be which is going to make things a lot easier for you than if it's very hard for you to use your tip without holding it straight up and down. I think now, like I said, if you're an outdoorsy type, then a Wharncliff Sheepsfoot might not be the blade shape for you. You might want something with a little more belly, because you need that belly to, you know, to cut things that you don't want to puncture all the way through. Like I said, like skinning and food prep and stuff like that. So, in my opinion, I think that this is more versatile, or this is more versatile than a full-on Wharncliff or a large belly drop point like that. I think having a little bit more of a drop point is better. Now, if having a belly does not matter to you one bit, like you don't skin animals, you don't really, you're not an outdoorsy type or anything like that, then a Wharncliff might just be right up your alley, because it's very, very nice for EDC. And the Wharncliff actually excels in a lot of ways for EDC than some blade shapes don't. But it especially matters for tasks like this, like being able to penetrate through something, get the leverage pulling back, and being able to make precise cuts. Or even being able to like pick something out of something, right? Like say a splinter, right? A splinter. You don't want to pull a splinter out with this. You just don't. It's not going to work out. You know, it's too much. There's too much belly there. But now something like a Wharncliff with a nice fine tip is going to be a lot easier. Now, I'm using a splinter as a reference, but that could be with a lot of things. I mean, there's a lot of times I use the tip of my blade to pick something out, or even to get into another object, you know, like say a screw head or something, right? Like say something as small as, sorry, I'm so blurry right now, something as small as a screw head, you know, cleaning that out. A nice Wharncliff works great for that. Now, drop point, it can work depending on how deep it is, but you see it's nowhere near as effective. And that can go for a lot of things. Like, I'm just using this as a preference. Now, say if I need to peel some wire or something. Now, if I have to cut down the edge of some wire, I'm going to want something with a nice fine tip. Now, a drop point might be able to work for that, depending on how good the drop point is. And the sheepsfoot might work good for that. But something with a big belly isn't going to be good for that, unless if your edge is fresh, new, and you use the belly, right? And you go right down it. Now, if there's copper inside that wire, it's not going to be good for your edge. And, you know, like, and I also try to think of what's going to, like, obviously when you have a fresh edge, right? Anything can work. But once you've used it a few times and now your edge is starting to get wear, now that blade shape is going to start mattering. Like, it's going to matter a lot more than if you have a nice fresh edge. And, you know, it's not like everybody has a strap in their back pocket. And, do you know what I mean? Like, it's going to matter the most when your edge is starting to take wear. What can keep going for that task, whatever that job is. All right, guys, I think you get the idea. Peace.